In 1519, Hernan Cortez made a decision that would echo through history. Upon landing on the shores of the New World, he faced impossible odds. Outnumbered and surrounded by uncertainty, he gave an audacious order: burn the ships. With no way to retreat, his men had one choice: fight to succeed or die trying. And they did succeed. Cortez's story isn't just about conquest, it's about commitment. It's about making bold decisions, eliminating excuses, and going all in on your vision. Welcome to Burning the Ships, the podcast where we explore what it means to take risks, push boundaries, and refuse to look back. I'm Jason Seward, your host, and each episode we'll share stories, strategies, and insights to help you tackle your challenges head on, overcome obstacles, and make your own history. This is Burning the Ships. Let's get started. Welcome to Burning the Ships, Weekly Ramble, and I'm your host, Jason Seward. And today this is kind of a spillover episode from last week's episode where I talked about the 5 pillars, or kind of the 5 necessary traits in starting a business or buying a business that you're taking over and running and things like that. And those traits could easily be applied to anything in life, really, but I kind of geared it towards business. And the last trait of the 5, and none were more important than any of them. They were all very important, but the last one was patience, and it's probably the one that I struggle with the most. So I wanted to kind of dive in on, I hit 5 topics last week, of all the traits, but I wanted to dive in specifically on this one, on patience. And I'm going to dive, again, I'll talk about some, some personal thoughts around patience just in general in life, patience as a parent, patience as a spouse, patience as a friend, and things like that. But I'm going to stick mostly to business. So before I get into that, I'll do JJ's joke of the week. And for those that haven't watched it yet, I had JJ on the podcast a couple weeks ago, several weeks ago now at this point. And if you watch that episode, if you haven't, go back and watch it, because we're not talking about any particular topic, but it was kind of neat to have him on and give the audience a little bit of a peek into JJ's brain. And one thing, if you have watched it, you noticed he loves science. He loves science. So a lot of times his jokes are centered around science, and sometimes I don't get them, or I get them, but he's a smart little cookie for his age. So this week's joke is a science related joke. So here's JJ's joke of the week. What did the scientist say when he mixed oxygen and magnesium? OMG. And that is JJ's joke of the week. I had to look up what the sign for magnesium was to make sure that made sense. So oxygen O, magnesium MG. So good one, JJ. So now we'll move on to patience. And it's funny talking about patience as I finish up talking about JJ, because he has challenged my patience more than any business on this planet, or that I've ever been involved with, more than any career I've ever been involved with, more than my wife, more than anybody else. That little tiny human being, all 49 pounds of him, has challenged my patience more than anything. So this is a fitting topic to get into right after talking about his joke. So, patience. As I mentioned, the thing I struggle with the most, not just in business, everything. I have always been that way. But really, I've got two things in my life that I am patient with, and these are both hobbies of mine. I guess a couple things, but two main things in my life that I can literally sit down. I don't need gratification right away. I can just take it all in and be forever patient. Those two things are hunting, specifically deer hunting, and the beach, sitting on a beach. And I don't know why. Those two things have been present in my life as far back as I can remember. I've hunted my entire life, and I've gone to the beach at least once a year my entire life. And by when I say go to the beach, I'm talking about vacationing in the Outer Banks, or various other places. But every year I've gone to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and spent at least a week on the beach. And every year, that week consists of literally every day waking up, eating a little bit of breakfast, heading out to the sand, watching the sand, watching the ocean, playing in the water, playing on the beach from about 9 o'clock to about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I do it every day. And where patience comes in there, now things have changed now with kids, right? So now the bulk of that time is doing various things with the kids. So it's an active day. But I literally can take a chair by myself, sit in the sand at the edge of the water, and sit there all day. I don't need a phone. I don't need music. I don't need anybody beside me to talk to me. All I need are my thoughts, a chair, and the ocean. And for whatever reason, I've always had the patience to do that. Katie and I, my wife, we frequently go down to the beach, just for long weekends and stuff occasionally. And it'll just be the two of us. And that's what we'll do. We'll go set up chairs. Um, I'll just sit there. We'll read books. We'll talk sometimes. Sometimes we don't say a word. We're just sitting there taking it in because we both love it that much. But that's one area of my life, for whatever reason, as ADD as I am, I can really just settle down and relax. The other area is hunting. Same thing. I, 100 times in my life or more, I have sat in a tree stand in the woods by myself from sun up to sundown. I walk in dark and I leave it and it's dark. And for those 12, 13 hours, I literally do not move. I mean, I might stand up in my stand to stretch every now and then, but I'm sitting there hunting, and I have the patience to do that for that particular activity. And I said earlier, I mostly deer hunting because I'm not that way. I hunt turkeys as well. I'm not patient with that. That is a run and gun. If not much is going on, I'm moving on to the next thing. So I'm not very patient with that. But when it comes to deer hunting, just sitting there in the still of a November morning all the way to the evening, I can do it over and over and over, and I never get tired of it. Outside of those two things, and I was going to say fishing, but the more I think about it, I'm not very patient with fishing either. If I'm not catching fish, I'm ready to go, right? So I really don't have much patience with that as well. But hunting and on the beach. So remove those two things, everything in my life outside of that, everything, I struggle with patience. It's been a hindrance in my life, in a lot of different areas because I want things to be done now, right? I have to get to the next thing. I'm always thinking that way. All right, what's next? Let's get past this. Let's make a quick decision. And that has served me very well. I would say overall it's been a net positive being that way because I don't get hung up in things very long. I don't overthink things. I just gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. Where it hasn't served me well is a lot of things in life, but especially business, need time to mature, right? And I talked about JJ earlier. Kids are the same way, right? I struggle with the patience with my kids because they also need time to mature. And that's a whole nother podcast episode talking about kids, but it's very similar in the sense with business, it needs time to grow, to mature, to figure itself out, or for me to figure it out. And kids are no different. They need time to just develop into who they are and who they're becoming. And it's sometimes very tough as a parent, especially wired the way I am, to sit back and let that happen without trying to influence everything, right? So very impatient when it comes to that. But as I mentioned, I'm going to stick to primarily business here. So one thing that I this is a good and a bad thing. I spent about 17 years in a sales organization, right? I sold insurance for a lot of those years, or really the entire time I was selling something, selling insurance products. A lot of that time I also managed a team that was selling those same products. So I was always involved with sales. I I had from day one pretty good success in that career. So I experienced gratification of put the effort in, rewards come behind that, and it just went boom, boom. I mean, in business, we talk about the hockey stick growth where it's kind of steady and then and slow, and then all of a sudden it takes off and you're booming. Um, I had a little bit of that. When I started in that career, I think I was 23 years old. So I was young, I was new. I had to learn a lot through a lot of mistakes, had to learn a lot. Um, but for the most part, when it just came to getting results and hitting goals, I had success pretty early in that career, and I continued to build upon that over the years. So the good in that is you know, just being fully transparent, I right from day one earned a lot of money in that career. 23 years old, I was earning more than I ever thought I would earn in my entire life at that point, right? Now, I didn't have much perspective at that point either, so I started gaining that through maturity and development and stuff like that. But I had the success pretty early, so my that's the good thing, right? And I continued that on throughout 17 years of that career. The bad thing with that is it didn't help me build any patience, right? So when I got into management in that career, that's the first time my patience was tested in that career. And I had to learn that, I'm managing, and that it evolved over the years, but it evolved to where I was managing a lot of people. And not everybody is wired like me, right? And I've talked about this on previous episodes where early on in my management career, I was leading people to try to make them like me, right? I had my own ways of doing things, and I thought everybody could be successful that way. I quickly learned that that wasn't the case, but I was that way because I was impatient. I didn't want at the time, and I evolved and I became a better leader because of that evolution. But initially, I didn't want to take the time to help somebody develop at their own pace. I wanted them to go at the pace that I did and have the success that I did because ultimately I was, as their leader, responsible for their results. So it wasn't until later in that career that I really honed that in and learned to be patient. Now, when I left that career in 2022, I did so I had started building a business on the side, right? That afforded me the opportunity to leave and go all in on that. Um, but that business, and if I'm quote unquote, the business I had built, it was a real estate business. I was buying and holding houses and small apartments and things like that. Um, Making a little bit of income off cash flow, building a ton of equity. That was our play at the time, is to build up a portfolio and build that long-term wealth through equity. Um, but that was a pretty cookie cutter approach, right? We figured out what we were going to lean into while we were working our corporate careers. I say I'm talking about Bill Phillips and we leaned into that. We were patient with that because it was easy to be patient with it because we had our careers that we had to focus on, and this was just a side thing, right? So it never, like, if we didn't get a house that we wanted, oh well, we move on to the next house. If it didn't happen tomorrow, we'd move on to the next day and keep trying. But that wasn't the main thing for a lot of years. When I left that career, now it became the main thing. And all of that energy that I had been putting into that career had to be refocused somewhere, right? And it was like hitting the reset button on my patience. Had I had this wild obsession with getting things done right away. And the obsession was more than anything else, it was a lot of pride involved or ego. But I had this idea that like I'm trying to think the best way to articulate this. From a financial standpoint, I had a very long runway. I'd been very frugal in my former career. And I had about 5 years of, just savings where I could fund my family's lifestyle without compromising anything, or even if I wasn't successful in this new career, I could cut off the strings to my former career, go into entrepreneurship, and I had about a 5-year runway before things got a little hairy where I'd have to go back to work, right? So I knew I had that runway, but at the same time, my mind was, I don't want to use up that runway. I want to get back to replace my former income as fast as possible. So I was very impatient. I was early on, and I say early on, we're talking, over 3 years ago, but um, I did not have this mindset of, we're going to methodically work with one vision towards one business, right? And let it build and use that runway because we have it. That was part of the plan. Now, Bill was way better at this. He was way better at accepting that we've got this runway, because he was in very similar financial situations I was. But we've got this runway. We have time. We know what we're doing. We're going to focus. We're going to build, 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 and then boom, it's going to happen. I did not have that. I wanted things to happen right away. I wanted to go buy more property, and it was tough at first because things were not moving the way I thought that I should be able to make them move. So I was getting very impatient, and I was throwing out all these ideas for myself, for me and Bill, things that we could get into to ramp up the cash flow and stuff like that. And that wasn't rooted in anxiety or stress that we hadn't replaced our former income yet. It was strictly an ego thing. Like I wanted to make things happen. And not for the sake of others. I had no desire to prove to others I could do it. That's never been my drive. It was just this internal thing that I had to do it. It became a competitive thing for me, not competing with anybody else but myself. And it was a little dicey at first because I just didn't know how to handle not having overnight success. I thought I was going to have that. So what did we do? I spent about 6 months bouncing all over the place with ideas when I left that job. Now our real estate portfolio was fine. It was doing great. We were kind of repositioning a few things, selling a few things, refinancing, doing stuff like that. But the real estate portfolio was fine. We leaned into, we were going to syndicate bigger apartment deals. Well, that was going nowhere. The interest rates were going up. We could not make a deal work when we were underwriting it. Bill, thankful for Bill, was killing every deal. Had it not been for Bill, and I was doing that myself, I would have gotten myself involved in so many bad real estate deals, right? But thankfully, that's why Bill and I worked together very well. He was killing them. And by killing them, I mean the numbers don't work. We're not going to bend on our numbers. And we didn't buy anything that didn't make sense. Bought a few things, but nothing major. So then I had this idea, we're gonna start wholesaling single family homes, right? Great business, everybody does it, a lot of people have made. So I chased that for a little bit. And then I chased a couple other things, but finally, as we were chasing all that, I was over here lending my own money, not even thinking about that being a potential business, right? So Bill and I were both lending our money out of our savings and our retirement accounts to other fix and flippers, sitting here making good returns on that. And it didn't register until about 6 months of doing that, oh, well, it wasn't that long. It was probably 3 or 4 months, but there's our business. That is a proven model. We're sitting here doing it. Now let's lean into that and build something. So we did that. I've covered this story a million times on this podcast and through, everything we're doing. We hired a consultant. Well, first we did a lot of research about what, the lending industry and stuff like that, and figured out kind of where we want to go with it. When we figured out where we want to go with it, we reached out to Kelly Garrett, Rehab Wallet, talked to her. That was kind of their model, was what we intuitively leaned to. Like that made sense, the way they modeled their business. It's unconventional. It's way different than most of your short-term lenders out there, but we liked it. We understood it. We knew we could make it work. So we leaned into it and hired her as a consultant. And that was 2 years ago. And at that point, I really realized that because they were kind of our crystal ball, and hearing Kelly's story and how they grinded for so long before before it popped off, I was like, okay, let me take a deep breath. Let me realize and really understand what the situation is, right? I left my career with a plan. I was implementing that plan, but I still was not being patient with that plan. So I completely changed. I said, all right, we're going to lean into this business. And again, this is through help from mentors and Bill, my partner, but we leaned into the business and nothing else. We stopped focusing on anything that took our focus away from that business, right? And we also accepted that this was not going to happen overnight. Now, I've still had big, like short-term goals. And early on, we were not hitting those goals. We were grinding, like I was grinding. Bill was grinding. But we were not hitting our short-term goals. Stuff was happening and it was growing, but I just had this mentality of it's going to grow way faster than what it was. So we go through month after month of slow growth. A little bit of investor capital would trickle in. We'd make a few more loans. A little more investor capital would trickle in. We'd make a few more loans. We'd have a few months where we have no investor capital coming in, so we can't make any loans. We're having to turn loans away early on. And that went on truly for, I'd say about 15 months, about a year and a quarter, maybe. And then we had a couple decent investments come in, and then that compounded a couple more investments, and then boom. Because of the patience, and we didn't waver, went through again 15 to 18 months, about a year and a half of just grinding. And we were grinding and not seeing the results we knew we were hoping would eventually come, but we were grinding. And then it started popping off. And that was beginning of this year, really. Kind of back to the fall of last year when things started really ramping up, but they have ever since, over the last 6 months. So it was a true hockey stick growth. For those watching, I'm using my hand to kind of make the shape of a hockey stick, but it was slow and steady, and then boom, all the work we had been doing, the seeds we've been planting, I use that analogy a lot, started growing. And then we started having a harvest. And we're in the middle of that now, and it's like exponential growth. Growth in 6 months that we expected in the first year and a half, 6 months is exceeding all those expectations. So a very slow year and a half, and then a 6-month period, and now it's rolling. That's exceeding all that. So what's my point here? If we had not exercised patience and really leaned into, for me, getting uncomfortable with things not happening as quick, because my nature would have been to throw in the towel within 6 months of not much going on. That's my nature. But we didn't. We kept at it. We kept doing the things, and that have ultimately led to what we're doing now. And things are happening now faster than we could have ever. We're exceeding what our 3 and 5 year vision was when we started, and we've just crossed over year 2. 6 months ago, we were way behind pace. But what everybody was telling us that had been through this process in this particular business, what they were telling us is just keep grinding, and it's going to pop off. So we believed it. We trusted that process, and it has. So again, I would have thrown in the towel had I not made that commitment to just grinding. Now, excuse me. Now we are in a position where it is really, we get to really lean into the thing we're most excited about. Building a team around all this, and all that takes patience as well. It's a different type of patience, but that takes patience. So we're building a team around all this, and now it's just scaling, but scaling responsibly. The lifeblood of our business are our investors, right? We don't have a business without investors choosing to trust us to protect their money, be good stewards of their capital, pay them their returns, and we've done that. So without that, we've got to continue to refine and protect our investors, refine our processes, refine our systems, and all that stuff as we scale. So the topic being patience, we're living it right now. What the reward is when you exercise patience. And I wanted to, this has really been a big thing kind of ringing in my ears here lately, because I'm being fully transparent. I suffer from like envy sometimes of seeing other entrepreneurs that seemingly have all of this great success and got it overnight, right? That's because of what you see on social media and stuff like that. But the reality is, most great businesses that have great foundations, they may have seemed to pop off all of a sudden and have instant success. But most of them, there was years of grinding in a garage, in a in a home office, or wherever it was, years of grinding, wondering if it ever would take off, planting seeds, doing the daily task, and trusting that those things will lead to a takeoff, or a big blow up. Now, we are in no way at the level of these companies I'm getting ready to give examples of, but I want to use them as an illustration of, the grind and patience. Start with Amazon. Amazon was founded in 1994 by Jeff Bezos. There's a picture, I've shared it before on social media, but there's a picture of Jeff Bezos sitting in this little crappy office with a poster board that looks like a child drew on it. It just says Amazon on his wall. He's sitting at a computer, probably around this time, around mid 90s, and he had nothing, literally nothing but an idea. 3 years later, so 3 years of grinding, trying to build Amazon, was when they had their IPO, right? 4 years after that, which was 7 years after they were founded, was their first profitable year. So think about that. 3 years of a grind before they did their IPO, they went public. Took them 4 more years to have their first profitable year, right? Do you think the people that invested in Amazon early on, at any point might have been nervous, right? So they do and he had investors before they had their IPO, but in 97, he was relying on investors, right, to trust his vision. And it took 4 years for the company to have their first profitable year. So ultimately, it took 7 years to turn his first profit from the time he founded it. And, Bezos, he had faced like years of skepticism from investors and analysts who didn't believe that like an online bookstore could last, right? And he kept reinvesting in infrastructure and customer experience, and then the world caught up, right? And Amazon is not just an online bookstore anymore. It's much more than that. We all see the packages show up every day at our homes, and it is what it is now. But it took 7 years to turn a profit. That's patience. Tesla was founded in 2003. They did not have their first success, like mass production success, until 2007. They spent over a decade operating in the red. That means they're losing money for 10 years before things started turning the corner. And then now they are what they are. Again, Elon Musk, and they had all kinds of production delays. He faced all kinds of criticisms, and market volatility and all this stuff. But when they released the Model 3, that's when they started gaining traction. But it took over a decade to get that traction, right? So they put in the work, they put in the grind. A lot of people don't know that story. And then there's several. I could go through a bunch of different examples of, another one, Spotify. Spotify was founded in 2006. They operated in Europe for 5 years before expanding to the U.S. And they expanded in the U.S. or to the U.S. They had to do that for 5 years in Europe because they had some licensing issues. But it wasn't until years after that they finally reached profitability. Now it's the dominating force in the music industry, right? Spotify. Again, a long time, a long grind of people being patient and not giving up and not throwing in the towel. So, like, the world loves a good headline about instant success, right? But like real momentum, the kind of momentum that sticks, right? It takes years to build. Like Amazon didn't have a profit in 7 years. Now, fortunately for us, I mean, what we've built has taken about 2 years, completely different. And when Amazon's talking about profits, they're talking much different profits than what we're seeing. But at the same time, took them years to get there, right? A lot of belief and a lot of non-belief and people not believing in them, but they fall through that. So you, it's I've heard this before and I love it. Patience is not passive, right? So I'll say that again. Patience is not passive. Patience doesn't mean build something, sit there, and stare at the ocean all day or for 7 years and all of a sudden something's going to hit. Or sit there in the woods all day waiting for a deer to come by. That's not patience, right? And I'll use the analogy of hunting, right? When I'm sitting in the woods enjoying nature and sitting there, I've put in a lot in most years. I've put in a lot of work to be in the right position, to be in the right situation that if a deer that I want to harvest comes by, I'm well prepared to do that. In business, all of these businesses I named, and there's hundreds more like it, and our business at 608B Capital, patience doesn't mean just sitting back waiting for it to happen. It's not passive. Patience is a very, very active endeavor. It means planting the seeds. So my job within the company is raising capital. That's my sole focus and marketing in general. And now focus more on finding new borrowers and stuff like that. But and still raising capital. Our company doesn't go anywhere if I don't raise the capital, right? Bill's over here waiting to get money to operate, right? To make loans and to fund loans and do all the things that we've built out. It doesn't happen without raising capital, right? I don't raise capital without building relationships, without having a lot of meetings. And all I did for a solid year and a half was every day wake up trying to earn the trust of potential investors to put capital with us, right? And then as I gained that trust, actually operating like we sold them that we would and providing a good enough service to our borrowers that makes us profitable enough to not only take care of our investors, but also pay our bills, right? So I had to sell that vision for a year and a half. That took a lot of patience, right? I had so many meetings and calls and all exchanges with people that, and still to this day I have it, but now, it's a little bit different now because we have had success. So people believe in it. I don't have to sell a vision. It's right there. I can share numbers. But early on, it was meeting after meeting, call after call, sitting down with folks, trying to sell this idea, sell this vision, explain the risk to them, explain how we mitigate it, all these things over and over and over, only to have most of them say, I love it, I like it, we'll do something eventually, maybe in a year, right? That's not instant gratification. I have to plant that seed and then take care of that plant as it grows until eventually now I've planted all those seeds and boom, we're a year and a half in. We were at the beginning of the year and we're having some success. I can go back to all these people, all these seeds I planted and say, hey, would you be interested now? Here's what we've done since we last talked. Here's where we're going. Here's our plan. And so we're actually now can go back to those folks and show what we've done because early on, some investors just took a risk on us. I mean, they took the risk. They gave us their capital and we did what we said we were going to do. And now we have a track record where we can go and earn the trust of other people. That all came through patience. So I wanted to lean in on that a little bit because a lot of people that listen, I know my audience, and a lot of people that listen are probably at that point, whether it's in business or career or life, whatever you want to say it, but where they feel like it's just not going anywhere, right? Um, you feel like you've been putting in the work and all the hours and all the grit and passion and just all this stuff into it, and it's just not great. It's not getting legs. It's not getting any momentum. Trust me when I say this. As long There's a couple important things. And I had Dan Oliver, the CEO of Danos, the founder of Danos, the seasoning, on the podcast months ago. And he kind of talked about this too. Number one, you've got whatever it is you're trying to build or get to take off and scale, it's got to be something that provides value, right? If you don't truly believe it provides a good value or a good service or solves a problem, then it's nothing. It doesn't have value, right? Nobody's going to exchange money for that value, right? If there is no value. So that's really important. You got to have a good, whether it's a product, a service, an idea, a vision, whatever it is, has to be valuable to someone or something or many someones or many somethings. So that's number one. But once you have that, you have to put all of your energy into whatever the daily task, the weekly task, the monthly task are to build and scale that. Whether that's meeting with investors, whether that is meeting with, in our case, borrowers, whether that is whatever it is, you have to grind to get it to a point where it can then build and scale, and you can be a little more passive in it if you so choose. But it doesn't happen. Like patience, like I said earlier, is not passive. It's not going to happen by just having this great idea and then sitting back and waiting for it to take hold and take off. It's not going to happen. You've got to put in the work. And I'm very passionate about this because I'm living it. And I see so many people, myself included, want to throw in the towel early on because they don't get, and I've said this before, how many, we'll never know, but there's so many potential millionaires out there that had they held on for another month, because you don't know when things are going to pop. If Bill and I decided after a year and a half that it just wasn't growing at the scale we thought it would, and we decided in December, end of last year, to throw in the towel, we would have never known. We had done good to that point. So we had enough success to know that we could see that it was going to work. But let's say, back up a little bit. Let's say summer of last year, a year into it, it wasn't going at the pace we thought. And what if we had thrown in the towel? At that point, we were about trying to think back, we were probably a $5 million fund, right? And that, like, that's good. Looking back, it's really good, in a year to raise about $5 million, but it wasn't where we thought we would be. Had we thrown in the towel, we would have never crossed over to this year. We would have never harvested those seeds we planted back a year and a half ago. And now we just had another investment come in this morning as I'm recording this. We're approaching $20 million probably by the end of the year in our fund. And it wouldn't have happened if we threw in the towel and didn't exercise some patience. So I've rambled enough on this, but I really want people, wherever you're at in your journey, if you feel like it's not taking off, keep grinding. But make sure you're doing something of value. If you're not, you don't truly believe your service, your product, whatever it is, providing value, reassess it. See if it might need some tweaking or maybe go into something else. But if you believe in it and it's just not taking off yet, keep grinding. Surround yourself with the right people. Get with the right mentors. Put a little tweak to whatever you're offering. But keep grinding. Keep going after it, because it will take off. If you put in the reps and you stick to something long enough that does provide value, it will take off, because most people quit. You separate yourself from the pack just by keeping on. And that's all I got on this. So with that, I'll wrap up another episode of Burning the Ships. This is my last recording before I head off to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. This won't come out till a couple weeks after that, but so when y'all are listening to this, I will be fresh off that. But so I'm excited, and as I mentioned, I'm gonna go exercise some patience by sitting on the beach for a week and just staring at the ocean. My favorite thing to do in the world. So with that, hope you guys have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Burning the Ships. I want to give a special thanks to our sponsor, 608B Capital, helping real estate investors secure fast, reliable funding to fuel their boldest moves. If you're ready to take your investing to the next level, visit 608bcapital.com to learn more. If you found value in today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps us reach more people who are ready to burn the ships and commit fully to their goals. And don't forget to share the episode with someone who needs that extra push to take bold action. I'll leave you with this. Burning the ships isn't just about removing the option to retreat. It's about unlocking the courage to charge forward. No matter the odds, the past is behind you and the future is yours to conquer. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Burning the Ships.